So our speaker today is Dr. Pamela Smoot, a native of Pittsburgh's Hill District. She was raised on Grove Place, a housing project located between what used to be Elmore Square and Bentley Drive. She is a graduate of Fifth Avenue High School, where we have a former teacher. From there, she earned her bachelor's and master's in history and government and public affairs and history and education from Tennessee State University and HBCU. She is also a graduate of Michigan State University, earning her PhD in 19th and 20th century American history with emphasis on Black America, and received training in archival administration from Wayne State University and the National Archives and Records Administration of Washington, D.C. In addition, Dr. Smoot is a graduate of the prestigious HERS Summer Institute for Women in Higher Education, Bryn Mawr College. Dr. Smoot is currently employed at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, where she has been a faculty member and administrator in the Department of History. She teaches courses such as Black Lives Matter, Blacks on the Western Frontier and Struggle, Resistance and Survival, the History of African American Women. As an administrator, Dr. Smoot has served as Director of Educational Enhancement, for minority students and Director of Recruitment, Retention, and Outreach for the College of Liberal Arts, respectively. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Phoenix Women's Appreciation Award, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Mood, Eta Zeta Chapter Phenomenal Women's Award, Miss Living Legend, University Women of Distinction, McNair Scholars Outstanding Mentor, the Faculty Women of Distinction, and the SIU Board of Trustees, Diversity Excellence Award, along with two of her colleagues for their Reclaiming African American Heritage in Southern Illinois project. Dr. Smoot is also active in community services activities, the Pumpkin Patrol, coordinator of volunteers for the Gateway chapter of the Multiple Sclerosis Society, Carbondale MS Walk, and a judge for the Midwestern region's Jack and Jill Oracle competitions. She is an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Please, everyone, welcome my friend and family, Dr. Pamela Smoot.
Miss Carly,
thank you.
Yay! Awesome.
Okay. All right. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me, and I hope we'll have a great time today. All right. So the operative words for today are race uplift, self-help, and institution building. What is race uplift? According to W.E.B. Du Bois, a noted scholar, premier Black leader, co-founder of the NAACP, founded in 1909, and founder and editor of the Crisis magazine in 1910, which is still being published today. Now, he defines it as educated Blacks are responsible for the welfare of the majority of Black people. Self-help means the more prosperous Black people are to aid those suffering from poverty and prejudice. And it also means developing one's individual capacities. Institution building is creating institutions to aid the community. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then there's community building. That means creating a sense of community, a neighborhood, something that people in the community do together, people working together. So once again, the operative words for today are race uplift, self-help, and institution building. So we're going to talk about the Coleman Home for Industrial Boys, the Coleman Home for Industrial Boys in Pittsburgh. During the last decades of the 19th century and the first decades of the 20th century, many African Americans required help. Black people were moving to Pittsburgh, triggering and creating a need for Black institutions and social welfare organizations. Some of these institutions were maintained solely by Blacks and others by whites. However, social welfare agencies, financial institutions, homes for the aged and working girls, orphanages, and hospitals were founded and supported by Blacks. They began to flourish in urban northern communities, and one such institution in Pittsburgh was the Coleman Home for Colored Boys. Black children, like elderly people, were the most vulnerable and fragile subjects of the race. Unable to care for themselves and sometimes delinquent and frequently orphaned, every community had to share child-related problems. Numerous homes for children were established in Pittsburgh by prominent whites, especially for white children. They included the Protestant Orphan Asylum, founded in 1833, the Pittsburgh Newsboys Home, 1877, the Baptist Orphanage and Home Society, 1910, and St. Rita's Institution for Infants in 1917. There were also, however, well-to-do white women who founded institutions on behalf of Black children, including the Terman Avenue Home for Colored Children in 1880. During the first decade of the 20th century, 3 orphanages were established by Blacks for the large number of abandoned Black children. They are the Coleman Industrial Home for Colored Boys, 1907, the Davis Home for Colored Children, 1909, and the Fairfax Baby Home. These efforts of these Blacks to take control over the plight or problems of Black children became a significant part of community building. We're taking care of each other. So now we have these 2 people, Samuel and Luella Coleman, who were 2 former slaves. They founded Pittsburgh's only institution for colored boys. And I'm using colors because during this particular period, that's how Black people were referred to. Both were born in Frankfort, Kentucky, where they met while they were owned by different slave owners as children. After emancipation or freedom, Luella, a teenager, left to go to Louisville, Kentucky, where she became a masseur, that's a person who gives massages, and a hairdresser. Samuel followed a different path, graduating from the school of Carl L. Wilson in Saginaw, Michigan, who was an artist, photographer, and a carpenter. After graduation, he returned to Frankfort, where he worked as a hotel waiter. There, Samuel will remain until he learned that Luella had moved to Louisville. Upon hearing the news, he set out to go find her. Word of mouth during this period was the most effective and best mode of communication in his futile search for his childhood friend that proved successful. In other words, he found her. Friends no more, Samuel and Luella became husband and wife in 1873. Together, they moved to Saginaw, that's in Michigan, a place familiar to Samuel and one with an established Black community of over 2,800 Blacks. Luella was a housekeeper, and he continued his work as an artist and a carpenter. By 1900, they moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, for reasons unknown. One might speculate that for better opportunities, an increase in racism and discrimination, or merely a need to change the scenery. Another consideration could be that the percentage of African Americans decreased from 2.4% to 1.4%. And then it's really cold in Saginaw too, so it could have been the weather. At the turn of the century, there were Black professionals such as doctors and lawyers and teachers. So perhaps they perceived Indianapolis as a progressive city where there were many more African Americans. There were over 15,000 African Americans in Indianapolis, and a place where African American men were politically active. The race had an established number of businesses that employed their own people and created other spaces for entertainment, recreation, and social organizations. Samuel and Luella owned a boarding house and at the time had 6 boarders residing in their home. Having lived in 3 states and married for 27 years, Samuel and his wife moved to Pittsburgh, PA in 1906, where they joined the Hill District's Ebenezer Baptist Church, pastored by Dr. Junius C. Austin, founder of the Steel City Banking Company. After several years of settling in the city, they opened the National Industrial School for the Arts and Domestic Science with courses in massage, scalp and facial treatment, hairdressing, paper hanging, which is merely wallpaper back in the day. You know, people, rather than paint, they had wallpaper, and cooking. Despite their success, the Colemans changed their focus when they noticed the plight of abandoned colored boys in Pittsburgh. Samuel and Luella began to care for unfortunate children deprived of their parents' love and care. Luella stated, and I quote, "My husband and I promised the Lord that we would give ourselves up completely to this work, and so far, no matter how hard pushed, we have always been taken care of. We can't expect things to come very easy, but there are some very generous people who give me clothes for the boys." The main purposes of the home were to provide refuge, education, and parental care for delinquent and homeless colored boys. As a matter of fact, they called Mrs. Coleman, Luella, they called her mother. In 1909, the Colemans planned and established the Coleman Home for Colored Boys in a 10-room house at 2816 Wiley Avenue. For those of you who are familiar with the city or with the Hill District, it would be about 2 or 3 blocks up from Jones Funeral Home going down toward Heron Avenue. The home's first residents consisted of 12 boys ranging in age from 8 to 14. They wore uniforms of white trousers, blue shirts and caps, black shoes and stockings, and neat white collars. They received vast training from Samuel and Luella Coleman in self-help, which included washing, ironing, cooking, and general housekeeping. Although they attended public school, Mr. Coleman also trained the boys as tradesmen and were taught carpentry and brick masonry. For their own enjoyment, the Coleman boys leveled the hillside next to the home and carved out a baseball diamond so that they could play baseball. By August 1910, the number of Coleman home residents grew from 12 to 24. These young men were from 4 states, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio, and Washington, D.C. 13 of these young men were from Pennsylvania. With reported success, the home was no longer for orphan colored boys, but also became a home for juvenile offenders. An Allegheny County juvenile officer met with Mrs. Coleman, asking if she would take in a young colored boy deserted by his parents. She agreed, rather than see him placed in Morganza, a reform school and sanitarium founded in 1897. It was located in Canonsburg. He was now a member of the Coleman home family. Shortly thereafter, it got good to them, the officer came back with 2 more boys, with the court offering a small sum of money for their care. It is important to note that the home received no funding from the city of Pittsburgh or state government to take care of the home. With the exception of a few dollars by juvenile court, the Colemans shared all of the expenses. Mrs. Coleman continued to do hair, facials, and massages, and Mr. Coleman sold his paintings and other artwork to help maintain the home. However, in their efforts to keep the home financially sound, the residents were not without responsibility. It was not uncommon for orphans to raise money for their room and board. During the summer months, the Coleman home boys worked at odd jobs for pay throughout Pittsburgh. For example, they had an 18-piece band, and for a small fee, they would play music for picnics, parades, and special occasions for community organizations and churches. The monies raised were an important source of revenue for the home's maintenance and other needs. During the fall of 1912, as the Colemans searched for larger quarters, a fire ravaged the home, destroying the facility and everything in it. With help from neighbors on Wiley Avenue and juvenile court, temporary quarters were made available until new quarters could be found. It took almost an entire year before the Colemans located a structure big enough to accommodate its residents at 1721 Bedford Avenue. Once again, if you're familiar with the Hill, you're going down Bedford Avenue just before you get to what used to be Lecce School or Conley Trade. So unlike the Wiley Avenue structure, it had no bathroom or laundry room, but it did have 14 rooms. Luella Coleman, to resolve these hygiene and sanitation problems, called on the Pittsburgh community, Allegheny County, and surrounding areas to assist the Coleman homes struggle to complete the facility with the essentials and to replenish or replace the clothing and blankets lost in the fire. Now, nobody lives forever, but a legacy does. Now, the Colemans are dead. From 1907 to 1923, Samuel and Luella Coleman successfully operated the Coleman Industrial Home for Boys, earning the respect of the city's African Americans, social service agencies, and other organizations. Its success is rooted in the 500 African American boys who came through its doors, where strangers provided food, shelter, safety, and an education opposed to a life on the streets. Luella died on July 16, 1917 at age 67, and 73-year-old Samuel on December 15, 1923. But their work did not stop there, as Pittsburgh's African-American community continued its support. In 1924, Pittsburgh's Black church community and Black women's clubs immediately responded to the Coleman Industrial Home's needs. For example, Macedonia Baptist Church, which is located on Bedford Avenue, donated $35. Ebenezer Baptist Church, $30. Ebenezer is located on Wiley Avenue. John Wesley AME Zion Church, which is located on Heron Avenue, $13. Brown Chapel AME Church on the north side, $27.10. And Bidwell Community Church, $21.06. Some donated outright, while other churches collected a love offering on behalf of the home. Black women's clubs supporting the Coleman home were the Madam C.J. Walker Benefit, the Golden Rod Social Club, the Matoka Clubs, and the Francis E.W. Harper League, to name a few. In addition, the Great Hiram Lodge, a fraternal organization, had given 3 quarterly donations, and the Baptist Young People's Union of Monumental Baptist Church on Wiley Avenue provided monthly donations. Some of these clubs gave monetary donations, while others supplied food, clothing, shoes, and blankets. The home also sponsored fundraising activities of its own and solicited help of Pittsburgh's newspapers. The Post, the Press, the Gazette, the Telegraph, and the Leader initiated strong advertising campaigns for the Coleman Industrial Home for Colored Boys. For example, they advertised Tag Day, and what that is that money is collected for a charity in the street, and donors are given tags to show that they contributed to the cause. So they had Tag Day, where the employees sold tags to benefit its 50 residents, with the proceeds designated for purchasing winter clothing. The tags donated by the Newsboys' homes raised $1,449.53, exceeding the targeted goal of $1,000. Bake sales, bazaars, flower sales, and dinners sponsored by the Coleman Home Board of Managers contributed to its financial woes. Everything was not always great. We have some troubled waters. In the absence of the Colemans, forces sought to change the direction of the Coleman home. During the May 27, 1930 Pittsburgh Urban League's special call meeting with representatives from the Coleman home, there were others, the Davis, Terman Avenue, and the Newsboys' homes, they were also present, and other institutions for the city's youth concerns were discussed regarding their futures. It was suggested to the board of the Coleman home that the conditions that led to the funding of the home seemed to have changed. The problem of delinquency among the colored boys is today a more pressing question than dependency. There is enough institutional care for delinquent boys living in the community. So it is therefore recommended that the Coleman Home Board consider directing their future service along the line of Big Brother work, with a view of saving maladjusted boys from crime and helping them to become useful citizens. So rather than take care of these delinquent boys, what they were implying is that they needed to prevent them from becoming delinquent. So that's what they needed to change the focus to. We're going to stop them from becoming delinquents. Other issues of concern with this during this meeting were the number of children in the Coleman home and the fact that they were from other states, which was against the law, and that they were not completely full. So the board of the Coleman home representative, his name was Charles Jackson. He spoke on behalf of the institution. He stated, "We took up the report for our organization. Our board thought that they would prefer to maintain their own policy and maintain the home. They feel that the Terman home did not want to give them fair representation on the board or give them a colored staff. They do not want to turn over the children without sufficient colored representation on the board." Now, the Terman home was managed and operated by whites, and they wanted to take the children from the Coleman home into the Terman home. And because they refused, some of the funding was cut off. All right, so the Coleman home board thought it was best not to give up the home. So the Terman home, which had access to the welfare fund, withdrew its financial support. At this point, colored caseworkers were being sought to place the boys in foster homes or reuniting them with their parents. So as times changed, so often did the mission of African-American institutions with the intervention of local, county, and state governments. African-American self-help organizations were able to sustain themselves for decades from within the community. Nonetheless, the Coleman home would survive another 25 years before its closing, despite the criticisms of it being poorly equipped, hard-pressed for funds, and in a very bad location. In its inception, it provided a safe haven, once again, for more than 500 colored orphans and juvenile delinquents. And one of the things that Luella had stated before she died was, and I quote, "They leave the home thoroughly equipped to fight the world. The boys who pass through the home have splendid records. Several have success stories also exist in the life of the Coleman home." And there was one example, a young man named Terry Godfrey, and he was in the Coleman home for like 18 years, and he became a physician. So, but the Colemans were major contributors to Pittsburgh's Black race uplift, self-help, and community building. One thing is for sure, it suited the purposes for which it was intended, to save the lives of young boys during the era when it was most needed. So this Coleman Industrial Home for Colored Boys lasted for almost 40 years. And with that, they had 4 locations. I mentioned the 2 earlier, but the other 2 were the 2500 block of Breckenridge Street and then the 3000 block of Center Avenue. So I'm open for questions right now.
You know,
Hello?
I went to, okay. This is B. Charles. I went to the prom with someone who had been in the Terman home.
Is that right?
And he ended up as a minister in the South. I don't know where he is now, but his name was Carl Russell years ago. And he and his brother and his sisters, they were adopted by someone else who from Penn Hills. And they went to graduate from Penn Hills High School. And I went to the prom with one of them.
It's amazing.
This is Tom. I didn't know there was an orphanage on the hill.
There was more than one. Okay, and some of the other ones that I mentioned, like if you go down Fifth Avenue, you know, across Penn Avenue, you know, we're going toward East Liberty or whatever, you know, St. Paul Baptist Church is on the right. Now, if you go down that hill and right before you get to that underpass and you make a right, there's a small street right there. That's where the Davis Home for Colored Children was located. But there were all kinds of institutions there, you know, that Black folks had established. You know, there was a Beulah Rescue Home, Mission. There were all sorts of things there. And the Black Women's Club movement, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it was actually formed in 1896 in Washington, D.C. But in Pittsburgh, there were well over 45 Black women's clubs. And these were the women who established day nurseries. So if you had, if a woman had a job and she had children, you could put your children in their day nurseries that they had established. They had working girls' homes. If you had moved to Pittsburgh and you didn't have a place to stay and you had a job, you could stay there for a small fee, maybe like a nickel a week or so. So a lot of this was, well before 1930s, because during that Great Migration, as more Black people began to come to Pittsburgh, a lot more of these institutions were needed. Because Ebenezer Baptist Church, for example, during the pastorate of Dr. J.C. Austin, they had what they called the Travelers Aid Society. So you had these women from Ebenezer Baptist Church who would go down to Penn Station, to the train station, and when those migrants got off the train, and if they had an address or something from somebody that they knew, the church would make sure that they found, whoever they were looking for. And then if you didn't have a place to stay, some of the members of the church would take them in until they found a job.
Wow. And I know Travelers Aid Society still exists in some form. It is in downtown Pittsburgh, and they provide transportation in the way of bus tickets and things for people that are that need help with getting back and forth to work. So that's interesting that that organization has been around that long. I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers Lecce. I mean, you all might be too young for that. But Lecce, I remember, I mean, it is right next to what we call now the Energy Innovation Center. Some of you all have been there for Citizen Science Laboratory. But right next to that is the building, the second school that Dr. Smoot is referring to. So it still exists in the city of Pittsburgh, which is interesting. We have a question from Armani. He says, how many challenges did the Colemans, I guess, how many challenges did they have as they were completing their goals? Is that what you mean, Armani? Yeah. So what type of challenges did they have?
The major challenge that they had to do with funding. Okay. That was the major challenge. And but once again, when I was talking about, those operative words, the community building, the institution building, the race uplift, back in the day, the Hill District community, I mean, it was like one. And, folks saw to the needs of other people. So, but once again, and I said, that the funding was the main problem. And that's the only one based on the research, that's the only one that I could actually see. All right. And then sometimes, they ran out of space because the numbers of all of the boys weren't delinquent, but I would say that the young men who were at the home, those numbers continue to increase. All right. So eventually they ran out of space.
Wow. What was the reason the numbers increased so much?
The numbers, because people were, a lot of times, and we're talking about this period between, say, 1890 and 1920, with that migration. And then you had, a lot of people just abandon their children simply because they could not take care of them, hoping that somebody else would. And in this particular case, the case of the Colemans, this is what happened. So, the number, people were always making reference, just like the juvenile court officer, he kept bringing students, young men to be cared for there. So as the population increased, so did the needs.
Did the Colemans have any children of their own?
They had one daughter. Her name was Carrie, and she ended up, where did she go? I think she was born in Frankfort, Kentucky. And, the record sort of falls off on her, because they also had a granddaughter whose name was Jessie. And Jessie, matter of fact, when Samuel died, Jessie came from Chicago to try to help, keep the home going. That was when Luella died. She came to try to help him, manage the home. But they had one daughter. Her name was Carrie.
Thank you.
Dr. Smoot, another question
yes.
from Chad. Michael asked, why didn't the Coleman Industrial Home last longer? Is funding the only reason?
It didn't last long, because see, once the state became involved, and the county, with the whole welfare system, they came with all these rules and regulations and policies, and, they were unable to keep up with those. And once again, the funding, if you didn't meet the requirements of the county and the state, then you couldn't get any money.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's another question. Is there a lot of historical context behind the donations from the church?
Behind the what?
Behind the churches mentioned.
Uh-huh.
My computer is going crazy. Is there a lot of historical context behind the donations for the churches mentioned? So do you mean does Macedonia Ebenezer? Is that what you're talking about, Armani?
Okay, he's asking me if there's some historical context.
Yes.
Armani, do you think are you asking like why those specific churches donated?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's fine. All right, I'm with you now. Okay, so Ebenezer, for example, at one time that was the largest church when Dr. J.C. Austin was there. That the congregation was a mega church. They had like 6,000 people in there. But anyway, the Colemans belonged to Ebenezer, but then the other churches, where they were just basically answering the need. Somebody sent the call out, and these are the people who sent the money. And see, that one of those calls led to other calls later on, so there were several other calls where other churches may have donated as well. Okay, so once again, they were soliciting, they were asking for help, or, the churches knew that they needed help, and this is what they did.
So I remember the Tacoma Club, that was a women's group. I remember them they donated a lot for other scholarships for people and so forth.
Absolutely.
Tacoma.
There were so many of those clubs, the Francis E.W. Harper League. Yeah, the Francis E.W. Harper League. My high school English teacher, Anna Gary, her grandmother was part of that Francis Harper League. And, she told me all these stories about how these women would have tea and everything. But all of these women, they contributed something to the community. And that particular organization, I can remember reading in their minutes where there was this gentleman and he died. And so he didn't have a family, so they got the money together to bury this man. It was just a little bit of money back then, maybe like $2 or $3 or something. But they were always doing something for somebody, always. Because see, and then out there, the Leamington home.
Oh my!
You all know Leamington home, right? The original house is right there on Leamington Avenue. It's still there. Okay, now back up on that hillside where they built that Leamington home, if you're with me here. All right, it thrived forever, okay, until, state got involved, and then, there were some other issues. But after all of those years, I think that was like I want to say it was 1894. I'm not sure, I can't remember, but that was late 1890s. That's when Fannie Peck founded, the Leamington home, and then, it thrived, and and, and the community kept it going because it was an old folks home.
Right.
They used to call them the homes for aged and infirmed women. All right. And aged homes for aged and infirm women.
I went to Leamington School, which was right next door. And I remember seeing all the ladies sitting on the porch in their rocking chairs all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
We had family members that worked there and our, family's friends. I remember going to sit on that porch too with some of the older ladies. They had red and white plates. I'm sure we ended up with some of those at our house. But we used to go over there and have lunch with them because our family's friends worked there. So
that's nice.
That is something that it did last for a very long time.
Yeah, and that was Mary Peck, not Fannie Peck. Fannie Peck, that's my friend in Detroit. She founded the Detroit Housewives League. Because you had all these women's clubs and everything, and, they were shutting things down. They wouldn't, the milk company, was it Meadows Milk Company? I think it was Meadows.
You've taken
And the
me on
folks
a trip.
refused to hire any black milkmen, right? So these women, these club women got together and they told the folks, if you don't hire some black milkmen, we're just going to shut you down. And they boycotted. And then the folks came back and said, okay, how many do you want us to hire? Okay.
Wow.
But they were actually, you know, putting pressure on people to do the right thing.
That's nice.
It is. Wow.
Yeah, because that Leamington home, that home for the aged and infirm colored women, it was 1894. I had a, you know, I have to remember so much, and sometimes I just get so much up there.
It's a lot.
Dr. Smoot, I actually have a quick question for you. So I'm Mr. Jeremy, but I am the, you know, as a former history teacher, that I just can't stop asking questions. So I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's fine.
Not that sorry. So in your research, did you find that the involvement of whether it was the municipality or the county or the state, did that, I mean, of course, that's going to hurt some folks because they put all this work into creating these systems of support for the community, but did the state of or the quality of life for the youth, did you find any specifics about whether that improved or whether the states or, you know, counties' involvement was detrimental to their quality of life? I know I've heard stories, but I'm wondering if you found any specifics.
During that particular period, no, I did not. I did not find anything of that nature.
Okay.
The only issue, really, okay, because see, the Coleman home, you know, it was designed for actually, you know, these young boys, okay, and then they start adding the delinquents in with the nice kids. I hate to say it that way, but you get my drift. But anyway, and so there were complaints, you know, by the state about that. You know, it's like, how are you mixing, you know, these bad people in here with these good people, and maybe these bad people right here will, you know, influence, you know, their behaviors on, you know, these really nice people over here. So, you know, but other than that, I did not find anything.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm not saying it's not there, but I didn't find anything.
For sure. Thanks.
Do we have any other student questions?
I think there should be some student questions, because see, I want to know about this race uplift, and what part of this do you think was race uplift? What part do you think was self-help? Something.
So they're silent right now, as opposed to keeping them silent. I know when I was reading your bio, I'm always impressed with the biographies, and I was impressed with you before. Not that, you know, I mentioned these things because I know you, but one of the questions that, you know, we have some a senior, I think, on our Zoom today, and some of our other younger students. What made you decide to attend a HBCU?
Well, I had visited school. Most of my friends growing up were older than myself. And they went to PWIs, which are predominantly white institutions. And I used to go visit them. It was a little small little black pocket of black folks, right? And then my oldest brother, Tony, he went to Tennessee State. And I had gone down there to visit with him a couple times, and I decided that that's where I should be. Okay. All right. So, and then my brother Jamie followed me down there. And my younger brother, Tim, he went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. So, you know, the family's sort of deeply rooted in the Black college tradition. And I think that HBCUs can give African-American students something that they can't get from a PWI.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And if you need me to provide some examples, I can do that. Because, see, I have been gone away from there for quite some time. Because, see, you know, after I got my bachelor's degree and, you know, I graduated, and 3 professors, including the chair of the history department at Tennessee State University, you know, they called me into the conference room. They said, okay, Ms. Smoot, because they always called you Mr. or Miss, you know, to show you some respect. And they said, what are you going to do now? And I said, I guess I'll just go home and get a job. They said, no, you can stay right here. We have some money and you can get your master's degree. So I stayed. And so then, you know, when I ended up going to Michigan State, they were like, okay, this is what you do. Now, if you want us to, you know, read your papers and give you some feedback, we're not writing anything for you, but we will give you some feedback on your paper. So you just send one down here, and we'll pass it around and send it back to you. All right. And when I got finished with that PhD at Michigan State, there was a job waiting for me at Tennessee State University. All right. And so, you know, I stayed there for 2 years. The teaching load was like really, really heavy, and I got popular really, really fast. And I had like almost 200 students, and I was burned out. Okay. But, you know, but they were mad at me when I left, but they were happy. They're still happy to see me when I show back up. All right. Because in one of the things that I do when I go down there, you know, I try to find the students from Pittsburgh, and I'll take them out to eat or take them to the grocery store and buy them some groceries. All right. But, you know, those relationships that you form there, they're forever, ever, ever. And, you know, it's just a whole nother experience. And you're in a place, and I've never been to a PWI. I'm only attesting to my experience at the HBCU. And, you know, they didn't play. You could not go to class late. They would actually lock the door. All right. You couldn't make excuses for things. They did not want to hear it. And, you know, sometimes they would let you in class if you were late, but they might make you stand up the entire class period. But see, all that was I call it hazing, okay? Because see, you were forced to make a decision. Is it more important for me to feel humiliated and leave, or is it more important for me to stand up in here and get this information? Now, because if you leave, you don't have it, right?
Right.
Okay. So, but no, it's a special place. And, you know, some people still think that those Black schools are inferior. They're not inferior because, you know, most of my peers here, mostly everybody went to an HBCU undergrad and got PhDs from Big Ten institutions. Okay. So if they're inferior, how are we able to do that?
Right.
Okay. And then just another example. I'm not trying to wear you guys out. I don't know how much time I have left. But my oldest brother had called me to tell me about, and my younger brother, Jamie, they called to tell me about, you know, these 3 young ladies in Pittsburgh that wanted to go to Tennessee State. But their parents didn't have the out-of-state tuition portion of the money. So I made a phone call. I sent an email, and about 2 weeks later, you know, I got a response, and it was like, you know, tell them to come on, you know, because I sent their test scores and their GPAs and their IDs because they had already, you know, applied. And so, you know, and the person said, just tell them to come on and, you know, we'll take care of them. So, you know, just to be able to pick up the phone or something and still make something happen after all the years I've been gone is special.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we know that you're still giving back to the to HBCUs, but what have you seen most as a professor that differs from your time in an HBCU?
What have I seen that's different? Well, here, I've never seen a student get up and walk out of class until I was here.
Wow.
Until I came to SIU Carbondale. You know, at Black schools, you know, you say something to a student and they, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. All right. And you don't have to go through any changes. You know, you're in a place where people actually care about you. If you miss class, they're like, okay, has anybody seen, you know, Miss Stallworth? Right. And if nobody says anything, it's like, if you see her, you tell her she better get in here. And if she's sick, she needs to let me know. So, you know, if you don't have any social skills and you know, you don't know anything about being responsible, those are lessons that you can learn right there. Yeah. Those are lessons that you can learn right there. But, you know, people stayed on you. Some of those people, some of the professors I had, they were worse than your parents. Really. I mean, it was just always something. But, you know, and if you didn't do well on your test, they're calling. It's like, you know, well, Carla, what is your problem? You know, what excuse do you have for this work that you submitted? I mean, but it's really a different kind of place. And because I had taken one of my TAs with me because he kept asking me when I was going to take him to Nashville to TSU, you know, to a football game. So I told him to meet me, you know, at 7:00 a.m. If you're not there, I'm gone. And I took him down there with me, and he was just in awe and wishing that he had gone to an HBCU because he couldn't understand how I knew all of these people. I took him to church, and all these people were speaking to me, and I walked him through campus, and it's different because here at SIU, you can say hello to somebody, and they will just keep walking. If you're at an HBCU and you say hello, somebody's going to speak back to you.
Wow.
Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Definitely a different experience and opportunity. Have any of our young people thought about attending an HBCU? I know we have a lot of 9th graders. Michael,
it doesn't matter. You should be thinking about it right now. You know, it's time to start thinking about, you know, college right now.
So
And
I
make
know,
sure that you make sure, I'm sorry, I was going to say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know a lot of our students are always looking at financial aid and, like you said, out of
Mm-hmm.
state. I mean, we have a couple HBCUs, of course, in Pennsylvania, but are the scholarships the same as PWIs or about the same? It's like, do they normally have that same level of scholarship?
They vary, but the money goes to the people who have the grades and the test scores.
Okay.
That's the case here. That's the case there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage, your students to do the very best that they can and to take advantage of your SAT or ACT test scores. Prep class. That's really important because, a lot of these other schools, they teach the test. All right. That's why some of these students do so well. But I would ask you to, start looking at scholarships and seeing what's available. And I would apply for everything that I saw as long as I met the requirements.
So another question is, what inspired you to become a professor?
Oh, I kind of just fell into here. It wasn't, I would want to say it was an accident, but it wasn't. Because I believe that God will put you wherever you're supposed to be. All right. Because I initially wanted to be a lawyer. And then I changed my mind and then I majored in political science, which was just really, really boring. It was probably not a political science. It may have been a professor because, sometimes that happens. You get these professors with these monotone voices and put you to sleep. But I didn't sleep in class. I need to say that. But I know, really. But anyway, so my major was political science and I had a minor in history. And then I started liking this history more than I liked the political science. So I flipped the script. So I changed my major to history and my minor to what was government and public affairs. But anyway, so I switched them over. And that's how I got here. It's just, it just happened. And it happened for a good reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Because, you need historians and see, I only write about dead people because they can't tell their stories.
Right.
They can't tell their story, so I'm always telling a story about some dead people. All right, and your students, what they need to do right now, because see that project that I was talking about, reclaiming African American heritage in Southern Illinois. That's me and one of the archivists, over in Special Collections, and a person from the community. It's an oral history program, so we've been out here interviewing people, before they die, so they don't take the stories with them. Because if they take the stories with them, we'll never have them. So I would encourage your students to get a tape recorder and go and interview their grandparents. If they got some great grandparents, go interview them, interview your parents, so you have those stories.
Right.
And so, those stories, they help people like me tell stories because, the oral history, that, bolsters whatever is in print.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, but yes, history, history is important. Everything has a history. Everybody has a history.
Yeah.
Another chat-based question for you, Dr. Smoot. In what ways did you strive to inspire your students as a professor?
That's a good question.
Oh, I love inspiring my students. Because see, let me just back up for just 1 second, because I didn't actually finish answering Carl's question. Because see, one of the things that I did when I was in graduate school was to do things that would make me more marketable. All right, that's how I ended up, with archives. I had a background in archives, and, and I used to work for the U.S. Department of the Interior as a historian, and I started the oral history program for the Harry S. Truman National Historic Site, did a landmark nomination for the National Register of Historic Places on this place called the Warp Center, which is in this place called Minden, Nebraska, which is in the middle of nowhere. All I saw were cows and fields. But anyway, and then I did a cultural landscape report on Harry Truman's house. In other words, how had the ground changed over time? So, I've done lots of things with my history degree because a lot of people think that all we do is teach. But, we can do a bunch of other things, just like most of those people you have up there in Congress. A lot of them are historians. But anyway, getting back to the initial question, inspiring my students. Well, first of all, I beat them down. All right. And not physically, but, when I walk into that room, I let them know who's in charge. This is my house. I control everything that goes on in here. But inspiring my students, I always let them know what's going on campus. I let them know about scholarships. I let them know about different kinds of events. I make sure, and see, I've had athletes in my classes, and sometimes they try to sleep and whatever, but, you know, I will go tell the coach on them. I have done that before. And then, you know, the coach will have them running around that track in the dark. I mean, that happened one time because a kid was sleeping in my class. And so I called the coach. He wasn't there. So he calls me back, but I wasn't there. He left his home number, cell number, and a direct line to his office. So I called him and I told him, I said, well, so-and-so, you know, has been sleeping in class and has not submitted his work. I went to class that next class period, and I walked in and the young man said, Dr. Smoot, I thought you loved me. I said, I love everybody in this room. He said, I was out there in the dark. I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, I was out there in the dark. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, you called Coach Kill on me, and he had me running around that track in the dark. I said, okay. But there was no more problems out of him. He was woke and turned his work in and everything. But I will not allow my students to not submit their work when it's due, because you don't want to develop a reputation like that when it's time to get a letter of recommendation. So I have I call them house rules, right? And that's how I inspire my students, a whole list of house rules. In order to survive, this is what you need to do right here. So you need to get to class on time. You need to go to class on a regular basis, turn your work in when it's due. All right, if you got any questions, don't hesitate to ask. But, you know, I take my students to breakfast. I'll take them to lunch. Sometimes I'll take them out to dinner, and I inspire them that way too. All right, but, you know, I try to keep them abreast of what's going on and, you know, do everything I can, you know, like the McNair Scholars Program, you know, have the students, you know, here, apply for this right here. I'll write you a letter of recommendation. You know, we have all of these paid internships in the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute on this campus. And right now we have 6 students, you know, working at the Illinois State House of Representatives. Well, they actually work both in the House and in the Senate. All right. So, you know, and I'm responsible for the Dr. Alexander Lane internship. All right. Now, back in 2011, let me know when my time is up because I can go on. But back in 2011, there was an exhibit in our library, and it was called African American Students at SIU. That's Southern Illinois University. And so they had these pictures up there. So I get this phone call, and it's like, Dr. Smoot, you need to go over to the library and check out this exhibit. All right. So, you know, he said, there's a black guy over there, and he was an Illinois state legislator. I said, okay. So I went over there, and I looked. And so I called the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. They said, come over. So I went over. They said, you think you can find anything else about this guy? So I said, I don't know. I'll go out here and look. So after about a week, I found some things, right? So I go back and say, this is what I found, and he's worth chasing. Make a long story short, this guy was a former slave in Mississippi, and he befriended this Union colonel who took him from Mississippi to Tamaroa, Illinois. He left him with another white family. And then they used him as a servant. And then when he got bigger, they put him out in the fields and turned him into an agricultural laborer. But then they liked him and they sent him down here to go to school in 1876. Graduated in 1880 and was a teacher in a one-room segregated school for black children here in Carbondale. And he did that for 10 years. And then he decided he wanted to go to medical school. So you got this former slave that got a degree from SIU Normal University. Then he goes to medical school, Rush Medical College in Chicago, graduated in 1895, goes to Chicago, hangs out his shingle, and then he decides he wants to be a politician. He runs for the Illinois State Legislature. He loses the first time. He ran again, and he won 2 terms before he died. All right, so you got this one person, young people, who went through all of that, slave, and look what he did with no financial aid, right? But anyway, that's just one of the stories. But so from that, we created an endowed internship. So the student will go to Springfield, Illinois, where state capital is, for an entire semester. All right. You know, and they get like a $6,500 stipend. And then there's a liaison who takes care of, you know, their housing, and they have to turn in reports every Friday and so on and so forth. But those paid internships, when you get one of those, that means that somebody wants you. You know, because you can get an internship and then folk have you running and getting coffee and doing those kinds of things where you don't really learn anything. So you young people need to pay attention to that as well. So if you're looking for an internship, you make sure you find one that's going to pay you and that you have something to put on your resume. Because most students, they just got fast food, jobs on their resumes. So you need to have something with some substance. And not only that, when you go to college, what you need to do is you need to get active, and you go join an organization, get you a leadership role in there. So, in other words, become an officer. So when you put your resume together, you can show that you actually have some leadership skills, because that's what a lot of employers are going to be looking for. Okay. Did I talk too much? I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. We have another question. Somebody named Tom said he couldn't go to TSU because his mom thought that him and Jamie would hang out too much. I don't know who that person is. But
that's funny. It's funny. Okay. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but because see, when we had the Grove Place in Elmore Square last reunion we had out in Highland Park, it's a guy from Bentley Drive, and he said, "You don't remember me?" And I was like, "Yeah," because there was a whole bunch of kids down there from Pittsburgh when I was down there teaching, including Leroy Diller's daughter, and they would come, "Can I borrow $2?" I said, "What you gonna do with $2?" They thought I was the bank, but I'd go ahead and give them $10 and everything. So, but yeah, it's amazing. And see, we go to homecoming every year. I remember homecoming at SIU. I was sitting in my office and I heard this toot, toot, toot. I said, "What is that noise out there?" So I went outside. I didn't even know it was homecoming. When you go to the Black HBCU, it's homecoming because they advertise it. And you got thousands and thousands of people at the parade, and just food everywhere, people everywhere. My mother loved going to homecoming.
I'll call you when it's over, okay?
Yeah, my mother loves going to homecoming. She's 87, but every year we going to homecoming. We're going to homecoming. We love going to homecoming. All right, but it's different because that student I told you I took to Nashville with me. We were playing Vanderbilt University football game. And so Vanderbilt's band was out there. It was like 50 people. And the young man said, "Dr. Smoot, where's Tennessee State's band?" I said, "Oh, they'll be here in a minute. You'll hear them when they come." And all of a sudden, he heard this, a boom, boom, boom. I said, "Here they come right now." But anyway, we were marching like 275 people. So, but it's different, I'm telling you. But, it was a good place. And then you have Fisk University that's just up the street, about 5 or 6 blocks. And then right across from there, you have Meharry Medical College.
Wow.
Which is, one of the surviving Black medical schools, because at one point there were maybe 14, and, it's one of the ones that survived along with Howard. So, and Xavier.
Yeah.
Questions, young people, where are you? Because see, the stuff I'm telling these folks, I'm not going to tell you what I'm telling you.
Right.
That's right.
Is there a particular student that left a meaningful impact on you?
From here, I have so many success stories. I got a bunch of lawyers. Because seeing it's interesting, because see, they still write to me and send me emails, and they send me popcorn from Garrett's in Chicago. If you ever go to Chicago, make sure you get some popcorn from Garrett. But anyway, Nicholas Simpson, Jasmine Sutton, the list goes on and on. Got a few doctors. It's been a good experience, and and it's encouraging because that racism and discrimination is everywhere. It's like the air that we breathe. All right, and some of those students, because that was one of the things, some of the students, African-American students, would come back and tell me, what certain professors said to them. Like the one student walked into political science class, and the professor asked that student, "What are you doing in here? Because Black people can't think abstractly." All right, so I had to do something about that. But, but I've had my share of experiences, because when I went to Michigan State, and the racism, it was really bad because you had to deal with it both off and on campus. But, you have to learn how to deal with it. Sometimes you just walk away. And I'm going to tell this story, but I don't want you all thinking bad things about me, okay? Okay?
We promise.
All right. Now, when I first went there, I lived in a graduate residence hall. So this was for graduate students, older people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we had been having racial problems in there, and then one day, somebody decided it was their turn to bother me. And so I had been doing some research for my major professor, and I had gone to the University of Michigan.
I'm on a Zoom call right now.
Special art, special collections to gather up some stuff. So I was down there all day. I go back at Michigan State campus. I go in the dining hall, in the residence hall, and I'm sitting down minding my own business. And so this woman, she kept bumping my chair, and I asked her to please stop. And she bumped it again. And then I said, look, I have really had a difficult day, and I would appreciate if you would not bump my chair again. So she got up and she moved, across the room. And I'm just sitting there, I'm once again minding my business. So I'm looking out the corner of my eye, and I see her walking toward me with this white guy. So I immediately stood up because I'm from the neighborhood, and you never let anybody hit you while you're sitting down. So I stood up, and I said, what do you want? And so, she started yelling at me, telling me, we came over here because we want to meet you. And I was like, no. So he said, we came over here to meet you. I said, look, I don't want to meet you, and I don't want to meet your friend. And where I come from, you tell a person twice, thinking perhaps they didn't hear you the first time, and you have been told. So he turns to walk away, and he had on this really nice white shirt. But he turned to walk away, and he called me Black B. And I had this liter full of grape juice, and I threw that juice in his face. And so he was walking toward the door after I threw the juice on him. And I threw the bowl of peas and carrots at him. I threw the beets at him, the salt pepper shaker. Then I threw the water glass, still had water. Then I didn't have anything else to throw but the tray, and I threw that too. And then I said a couple of things to him. I won't tell you what I said. But anyway, so he left. And then the girl that started all the trouble, I looked over there and she started laughing. So I went upstairs, put my sweats on, put my sneakers on, and went out in the car and got my aluminum bat, and I was going to beat her up, right? So them other, 6 or 7 black folks had gone to Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. They must have went into the dining hall. Even when I went to get the batter, I changed my clothes. But anyway, I was going back in, and they were like, what did you do? They said, we went in there and the people started getting up, running, and the people in the wheelchair were bumping into each other, trying to get out, like I had called in the reinforcements to come and help me. But anyway, they said, the dorm director, he was like, well, I heard that you stood up on the table and you said X, Y, and Z, and, is there a way that we can fix this? I said, you tell him he better come back and apologize to me by tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And if he doesn't, I'm calling Pittsburgh and nobody's coming over here to talk to him. So anyway, make a long story short, after that, that pocket of white people, they stopped bothering black folks. All right. And that was a good thing, even though folks were like, we can put you out. I said, as long as they go too, but I wasn't bothering anybody. They were bothering me. And see, in the dining hall, there were like over 500 people in there from all over the world. So that was a lesson for them too. Anyway, it was hard, but I got through it. And sometimes I used to ride around in my car and scream and go back in the house.
So this Tom person said that Dr. Pam's a thug. And my acronym for thug is talented, highly, and uniquely gifted. So yes, you are a thug.
Downright hateful, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah. We must be Zoom bombed or something. I don't know who this Tom guy is. But
yeah, but we had, and then, you go to HBCU, I went down south and I had ate all different kinds of foods that I had never experienced before. It was a wonderful eating experience too. Okay. It really was. It was great, really. So I went to go ahead, Carl. I'm sorry.
I said I might have to go to an HBCU.
I'm ready to go today.
Me too.
Let's go, Carl.
Tom came one time with Jamie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they went a few years ago. It was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a minute ago, Mm-hmm. And did you all know we had a black hospital in Pittsburgh?
No.
Where?
Forbes? Which one?
Yeah, we had a hospital in Pittsburgh. We had all kinds of stuff in there. You had all these black pharmacists. We had some of everything in there. Livingston Hospital.
I have an aunt who was one of the pharmacists. She had her pharmacy right down up the street from Aleo Wild, my Aunt Marie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it was Livingston Memorial Hospital.
Where was it?
It was I can't remember what street it was on, but it was on the hill. All right, and we had these black doctors in there. You know, I think one of them was Dr. Charles Carroll, and there was one, a Dr. King and a Dr. George Strickland. There was a few of them. But we had, you know, and then you had Mr. Chauncey up there, and seeing Mr. West trained all those morticians around there, including Mr. Jones when he was living, Otis McCree and W.T. Poole. Remember Poole Funeral Home? Yeah. But there were all kinds of things around there, really. And let me see. You know what? That hospital, it was on, let me see. I think it was on Bedford and Fullerton Street. Fullerton Street is not there anymore. That was part of that hill that they tore down there, where they get ready to put that park down there in the Civic Arena parking lot.
Yeah.
St. Rosalia's?
Yeah.
No, that's on Bedford. And is that the same thing as the Rosevalia? That was what was that? That was an orphanage or something? What was that?
A home for unwed mothers.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
No, Michael, did you know all this existed in the Hill District? I think we only have one of our Hillians on the line. So much history.
And then, you know, we had J.C. Austin started that Steel City Banking Company. We had a black bank. Actually, there were two of them. There was one in Pittsburgh, one on the Hill, and there was another one in East Liberty.
No.
We had all kinds of things back there in the day, really.
I know there's an entire new redevelopment in the Hill. We'll have Marimba Malayans, who is the president of the Hill District CDC, next week, talking to the students. So I'm wondering if she knows a lot of this history that you're sharing with us today. We're going to have to quiz her next week, guys.
Because see, that Steel City Banking Company, that was at, it was on Wiley, down there at the bottom. Once again, where the arena parking lot was down there.
So was that before the first development of the Hill? Okay.
Yeah, this was like in 1919.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't typically deal in contemporary history. I told you I only do dead people.
Can't blame you there, Ms. Dr.
Well, I bought
see, you know where up from West Funeral Home going up the hill, you know, that's where the colored YWCA was. You know, before it moved down on Center Avenue, down there where Med Center. You remember Med Center? Nope. Med Center across the street from the Black Beauty, or what's left of the Black Beauty.
Yeah, I know
Ellis Hotel was on the corner. But anyway, yeah, so that YWCA was up there. You know, they always said colored. Because, see, you could tell, you know, you had YMCAs, and I had asked the question, you know, how do you know the difference, you know, between them? And, you know, the colored YWCAs, they were always on the street. They were named on the street, like the Center Avenue YWCA or the YMCA. It was always Center Avenue first. But that's not how they referred to the white YMCAs and YWCAs.
I never knew that. Wow.
Were they just referred to by the people they were named after?
No, they didn't have at that time. They weren't named after anybody.
Oh, okay.
Okay. No, they weren't named after anyone. And so, yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah, so, yeah, Center Avenue YWCA, Center Avenue YMCA. Yeah. In Chicago, you had the Wabash Avenue YMCA, but it was always the name of the street before the YMCA, so you knew that it was black.
Wow.
I remember my father came to Pittsburgh, and he stayed at the Center Avenue YMCA. They used to have all young men. That's where they would stay when they would come to a new town.
Yeah, because the YWCA on Center, you know, that was for, you know, just women who had jobs. You know, you had to pay a little bit of money, you know, every week, and there was a parlor in there, you know, a little common area where they could sit, and they shared meals and everything, but you couldn't have any men in there at all. But you know, those black folks back there in the day, sometimes I wish I could raise them up from the dead and have them come back and fix everything back up for us, and then they can go lie back down. I'm serious, you know. Yeah, these stories, there's something else, and you know, K Club, all of those places, and the
I
ICE,
remember
the
the K
Irene
Club.
Kaufman Center.
Yeah,
the Irene Kaufman Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Irene Kaufman Center is now ACH Clear Pathways. It's a youth program that's being renovated for like the 52nd time. And the Blakey building, the Blakey building, or the K Boys Club is the Blakey building, which is now University of Pittsburgh CEC. And the New Granada will be the New Granada again. It doesn't look the same, but it will reopen sometime next year.
Okay, it's about time. That's really good, you know, and I can talk to you about all the marble floors in there too. Yeah,
I can't wait to see it. They started doing movies, was it last week? With Lions Middle School or high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so
because I did a feasibility study on that, because the Colored Knights of Pythias, you know, they raised that money to build that building.
Yeah, they're working on it. So Pitt will be on their top floor, I believe it is. They've rented like 10,000 square feet. That will be the home for the Community Engagement Center for the University of Pittsburgh. They'll have a space for like TED Talks and a community kitchen where entrepreneurs can go in and use the facilities and computer labs. So there's an entire project that's rolling out that's, you know, coming close to completion within the next year or so.
That's great. That is great news. They finally
took care of the drainage issues in the Wesley Church as well. I think they took care of the old mine that was running underneath. So I think that they're. I was just reading that they're looking to incorporate that with some of the rehab in that area too. Which, I mean, that building is so beautiful, and it's just all tagging on the inside.
Which building are you talking about?
The Wesley Baptist Church.
Wesley Center.
Wesley Center, no?
Yeah, Wesley Center, AME.
Is it on Center or on Heron?
I think it's the one on Center.
Yeah, the one on Center with the big, beautiful.
Okay, that's Wesley Center. Wesley Center, AME Zion. Okay.
AME Zion.
Yeah, I was just reading about that actually.
Yeah, okay. Ham's Barbershop is getting a rehab. It's going to be a barbershop, apartment buildings, the community space. Tommy? Yeah, Tommy bought it. He got a community grant for that to do, and some loans, I'm sure, to do that project. So there's so much renovation happening in the Hill. We won't be able to recognize Center Avenue when quarantine is over.
Okay, but that's good, because, you know, it's been years, decades. Yes. I mean, it still looks like, you know, ravaged from the riots. All right, because I can remember just being a kid, we didn't have to go downtown for anything. Everything was on Center Avenue.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the who is it? Reverend Grayson's people reopened the Cafe Mocha, which is now
I heard that.
Community Cafe or something like that. So it's happening. It's just a process. I mean, and it's been, like you said, I mean, you were there before I even thought about it, but I know in the 20 years that I've been working with different Hill District partners, we've been hearing about the New Granada and the Center Avenue corridor, and it's coming. So finally, here we are in 2021. It's coming. So
it's been at least three decades.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. So.
Well, I'm glad it's coming to fruition. Where are those young people? Do they have anything else they would like to ask me so I can inspire them?
I'm hoping they're listening. I see, square boxes, but they do have to write a journal, so we'll get some feedback later. But I
think you've just left them speechless, Dr. Smoot.
Yeah, this is incredible.
You think so?
I think so. I definitely think so.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. No, but it's been a pleasure. Does anybody else want to ask me anything?
Any final questions for Dr. Smoot?
I want to thank you for the trip down memory lane. I have enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Students, can we have a microphones on, if not cameras on? Thank you for Dr. Smoot for taking the time to speak with us and
yes, absolutely,
share her experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been great.
Pam, I just have one question. Were the Colemans from Pittsburgh?
No, the Colemans were slaves in Frankfort, Kentucky. They were both from Frankfort.
Okay.
And they just, you know, kept migrating, moving from here and there, and they finally landed in Pittsburgh, and that was the place that made them happy.
Okay.
And they're buried over there in that Highwood Cemetery. Both of them are buried there.
Is Highwood on the north side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're over there, and you know, when I come home, I'm gonna go find them. I had the marker and everything, and because when I was talking about that guy named Alexander Lane, look, I was looking for him, looking for his grave and everything, and so I was searching through all of the cemeteries in Chicago, you know, because they got this system now where you can just, you know, go to the cemetery and punch the person's name in there, and if they're there, it'll fly up there, and you'll see where, you know, the headstone and whatever other information is there. And so I'm looking for Alexander Lane, and then I said, oh my goodness, the man was right here in Carbondale in the cemetery.
Wow.
So I'm up there looking for him in Chicago because, you know, when he died, his wife brought him back down here to Carbondale where his life actually got started, right? So anyway. And see, that was a good story, too, because I managed to talk to Alexander Lane's granddaughter.
Wow.
And she was 90 years old. And so that's where I got all these beautiful photographs from, you know, because I'm actually finishing up the book on him. And I had these beautiful photographs. And as a matter of fact, his wife's grandmother, she was a former slave, but she had made this quilt out of her pieces from her slave mistress's dresses. In her slave dress, and she made the quilt, and she gave it to him when he graduated from medical school in 1895. So when the granddaughter died, her son gave me the quilt.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's so
incredible.
exciting.
Okay, and so it's in our special collections
I love it.
department here at the university. But I mean, it's just an amazing story, you know, get all these things. It's, you know, and see, you know, when you're dealing with history, there's always something else. You know, always something else to go and find, and another idea shows up and everything. So what do these young people want to do with their lives? Do they have any ideas right now?
All right, so Dr. Smoot is definitely not able to hear us. We want to thank her, even though she can't hear us. I think she was awesome, nothing that I didn't expect anyway, and I thank you all for joining us. Please join us again. Tomorrow we have Dr. Harry Clark, who is the co-founder of Kappa. And next Friday we have Marimba Malayan. So thank you all for joining us, and we will hopefully see you again tomorrow or next week.